What is up, Leafs fam? This is the Leafs Convo. I am Norman James. There's so much to talk about right now regarding the Maple Leafs, even though their season has ended. Mike Babcock in the desert trying to reach out to Auston Matthews. Is that the case? Perhaps there's something more to it, something less impactful, right? Mike Augello wants to talk about that. Plus, we have been following the Marlies as they journey towards a Calder Cup championship, and right now they are flying. 4 straight wins, a 7-1 shellacking of the Crunch, now 1 game away from getting into the Calder Cup conference finals. There's all sorts of stuff going on. Brad Marchand licking people. John Tavares, is he going to come to Toronto? And the Hunter Dubas thing. Can't these two just work together? Mike Augello ready to go. So am I. So are you. The Leafs Convo starts now. And here is our friend, the one and only Mike Augello. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Hello, Norman. A lot of traveling this weekend, covering the Marlies in Toronto and in Syracuse. But positive results for the fans of the Maple Leafs and the Marlies because they're up 3-0 on Syracuse.
What do you make of that, Mike? They had a little bit of a hiccup there. Utica coming back to tie that first-round series at 2. The Marlies just getting it done to move forward, and now they've won 3 straight over the Crunch and look not only in command of that series, but look to be in good position to make a run for this Calder Cup.
Well, I mean, they were the most successful team on the road during the regular season in the AHL. I think they had 30 victories. So, success away from Ricoh Coliseum has been something they've been used to. And it was a little bit of a shock when they lost those 2 road games to Utica, but Thatcher Demko, who is probably the Vancouver Canucks future goaltender, really stood on his head in those 2 games. So that could be the explanation. But, in this series, they won a sort of a seesaw battle in game 1. Game 2 could have gone either way. It was, double overtime, over 100 shots between the 2 teams, and a fortunate Freddie Gauthier goal in double OT got them the victory. But yesterday in Game 3, it was a systematic, dominant demolishing, and that's something that's unusual because they lost in that building 4 times last year to Syracuse and losing in 7 games. And of the 10 games that they played in the playoffs, that was the first one where the team that was on the road won.
Do you think that double overtime loss broke Syracuse's spirits? We've seen this scenario play out in sports. Let's take the Raptors and the Cavaliers. Game 1 in Toronto, the Raptors led that entire game, and then down the stretch, LeBron and the Cavs took over, and they won by a point. And it just seemed to change the complexion of the thought process and the expectation of the series. And we know that the Cavs are about to sweep the Raptors. And in this case, the Crunch are thinking, well, there are some vulnerabilities that Toronto has shown, and you go into double overtime. If the Crunch scores, perhaps that sets the Marlies back a little bit in the way they believe in themselves, but Freddie Gauthier gets it done, and then it seems as if the Marlies have really found their groove, and perhaps that could just be a catapulting of the Marlies into a position where they just feel like they're invincible.
Well, I think it's a number of things. First of all, Syracuse didn't get the replenishment of the roster that the Marlies did from the Leafs. They got Janssen and Dermott back. This year, Tampa Bay's in the Eastern Conference Final, and guys like Yanni Gourde and Corey Conacher and Jake Dotchin and Slater Cuckoo, all these players, they were in the Syracuse lineup last year, and they're not as deep. They have some really good players. They're a very quick team, but they're not as deep, and some injuries have kept some of their better players out. But I think that essentially the Marlies are a better team this year, and they really showed it yesterday. I mean, and it's nice when the AHL team wins, but there are young players on this team that within a couple years or maybe even next year will be on the Leafs. So it's something that will have a positive effect for the big club going forward.
This is the Leafs Convo. If you are a returnee, thank you very much for coming back. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. Please stay a while. We record through Anchor. It ends up on iTunes, Google Play, and then it lands on YouTube where all the real magic and action happens. So thank you very much for your support. And again, we welcome you. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Norman James, Mike Augello. Partnership in Leafs talk for well over a decade now. Michael, is this the roster that the Marlies are dominating with and impressing with? Is this another example of what Kyle Dubas can do with obviously restrictions, with young players, with trying to fill holes, avec, journeymen here and there? Or perhaps is this an opportunity for Kyle Dubas to say, look, this is what I can construct at the AHL level, knowing what I have down here and what the Leafs roster currently presents itself with. Give me the opportunity to run the big franchise, and you're going to see more success.
Well, I think it's a sort of a mixture here. I mean, you definitely see the young players that were drafted by Mark Hunter, the Grundstroms, the Andreas Janssen was, I believe, a Dave Nonis pick. So was Pierre Engvall. But, some of the young players, the Travis Dermotts, that were Hunter draft selections. But you do see, AHL veterans being brought in to help the team along. Mm-hmm. You do see guys who are free agents, like a Mason Marchment, the son of Brian Marchment, who was just signed to an AHL contract a couple years ago. He has worked with Barb Underhill. He's improved his skating. He's big. He's tough. He's actually scored some goals, and I think he played with the Erie Otters in the OHL.
He did.
But he did. He's become a more well-rounded player, and actually the type of player that the Leafs don't have a lot of, which are bigger, tougher, grittier players. And I don't know whether he'll ever make the NHL, but he earned himself an entry-level deal. He's an effective player. He's been a disturber in the playoffs. He scored a goal here or there. He's been an effective guy for the Marlies, and I think that's the talent recognition that Kyle Dubas has brought to the organization.
Don't you think a lot of Kyle Dubas' supporters would look at Mason Marchment and think he's garbage, and their Messiah thinks otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, teams cannot be one type of player. They cannot be all skill. They cannot be all toughness. They have to have enough of one aspect and some of the other to make the team be successful. I can't remember who it was, but somebody was talking about. I think it was Brian Burke was talking about Bill Torrey, the late Bill Torrey, and he was asking him, give me some advice about how to be a general manager. And he essentially said, you have to have, a team that is capable of playing, speedy one round, tough another round against a team that has great penalty killing or power play. In other words, a team that's diverse and a team that can do anything. And I think that, I think any good general manager in this league has to follow that. And I think, Kyle Dubas is not shutting himself and saying, well, we can only have guys who are pro-analytical and skill players. You have to have a well-rounded team to be able to win.
Truculence, pugnacity. What else do we have in there?
Testosterone, yes.
Testosterone. This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James, Mike Augello. So a report through Sportsnet indicates through sources that Mark Hunter is the front runner for the Leafs GM position. I don't know. We have to take these reports with a grain of salt. For those who are all pro Kyle Dubas, I'm with you. I think you're right. But please don't close your eyes to what Mark Hunter has done in his hockey career. Mark Hunter would be hired by any NHL team to run whatever he wants. The guy is, he's a hockey savant. He's a hockey master. He understands what he's doing, and he could probably be a really effective general manager for the Maple Leafs. That said, I'm just not so sure he wants to deal with the social responsibilities of running that hockey franchise. Whereas Kyle Dubas, he's well positioned to do that because he's well spoken. He smiles. He's a good looking chap. He's got the resume that's in process, and that's it. That continues to be built with the Marlies and some of the things that he's already accomplished. Again, I go back to the idea of a two-headed monster here, but we don't know the dynamic between Dubas and Hunter. And maybe Hunts, as they call him, doesn't necessarily want to take his marching orders from a guy who's 25, 30 years younger. then again, I don't know if there's an ego thing there, and there might be some money at play. And Mark's just like, throw a couple 6, 7 more digits onto the contract, and I'll stick around and do what you want. Give me a comment on that, Mike. We don't want to go too long, but there's obviously the Mike Babcock Arizona stuff and maybe a few other things.
Yeah. Well, it was confusing because the report from Sportsnet came as from the Saturday Night headlines with Nick Kypreos and Elliot Friedman, and Kypreos didn't say that Hunter was the front runner. Okay. What he said was, it was Sportsnet's error when they tweeted out the link to the video of that segment. He said that executives around the league believe that Hunter has the better resume based on what you just said, his long experience in the OHL with London, and he's been a coach in the AHL. I mean, he's got a great resume, and I agree with that. But and Kypreos even came out after Sportsnet had posted it on Twitter and says that's not what I said, and he clarified. He says now there is no front runner, but what's going on here is you've got two qualified people for the same position. According to Elliot Friedman, Hunter and Shanahan met on the weekend. I'm assuming that they will. If he hasn't met with Kyle Dubas already, he will meet with him. I know Dubas was in Syracuse yesterday because I saw him after the game, after the victory. So, I mean, this is a process. It doesn't sound like it's going to be something that's going to be announced in the next couple of days. It probably is going to take a couple of weeks. And, I continue to think that there is the possibility of somebody being brought into the management group with experience. I know that, the name of Chuck Fletcher was mentioned, and even the name of Ron Francis, who apparently has some connection with Dubas going back to, I guess his roots were at Sault Ste. Marie, and Dubas obviously his roots were at Sault Ste. Marie as well. So I think they will maybe add somebody to the organization in terms of experience in case Dubas does get the job and Hunter decides to go elsewhere. But right now it's a fluid situation, and I don't think we're anywhere closer to having a final decision made.
This is the Leafs Conversation. Mike Augello in Buffalo, New York. Norman James in London, Ontario. Collabing for you. Leafs Conversation is the result. And, these are the results, these reports, this sort of the divisive nature of the news right now regarding the Maple Leafs as a fallout to a 7th game loss to the Boston Bruins, who are no longer in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Hallelujah. And I mean, it's frustrating, but you know what? If you don't want to talk about these things at this point of the year, keep winning. Speaking of a divisive story, this whole saga that may be just totally dreamt up of Mike Babcock traveling to Arizona to intervene with with Auston Matthews and his maniacal hatred for the head coach, and Mike Babcock's going to then travel across the oceans to seek Frederik Andersen, who's lost himself in anger over the head coach. I mean, what the hell do we make of all this stuff? Isn't this perhaps a head coach who's doing his due diligence, maybe just to talk to 2 of his key guys and make sure that everybody's on the same page? And perhaps Mike Babcock has had a bit of a moment with himself, thinking that maybe there were some lines of communication that got blurred or that were jammed up during this process. And maybe there's a way that I can just go down, go have a meal with the family, maybe go to have a game of golf, and just make sure that everything's peachy keen as we get into the off season here. I mean, I know we're right. Dreaming up scenarios here, but there's just such a divisive nature to the reporting right now. And it seems like Mike Babcock represents this old school, this authoritarian way of thinking. And poor Auston Matthews needs his ego stroked, and he represents the youth. And, poor him. Like, what's going on, Mike? I'm not falling down on either side of this story here. What do you make?
I don't think there is a side. I think call me naive, but I think that Matthews and Babcock in the season-ending press conference a few days after the Game 7 loss, they said that there was really no divide. They said there was no, obviously Auston was upset because he wanted to be out there more in Game 7. He wanted to win the game, and he played 18 minutes, so it wasn't like he was benched or anything like that. But he's a young, talented player who wants to take on more responsibility, and Babcock is somebody who is, I think, sometimes limits his players, but it's for a reason. But in Game 7, when you're down a couple goals, then maybe you just throw caution to the wind.
Yeah.
There could have been a little bit of bad blood there, but I think it's sort of been overemphasized. And from what I understand, and we don't know whether Babcock went out to Arizona to talk to Auston Matthews, or if he went out there to have a family vacation with his wife and kids. We don't know. In terms of going, he's gone to the World Championships the last few years with the Leafs hierarchy. So if he goes over to Copenhagen and Herning, it's not gonna be because he has to powwow with Freddie Andersen. It's probably because he's scouting players that the Leafs might be interested in signing in the summer. So I think there's a lot of misconstruing things, and also now that the Leafs are out, you have to have something to write about. So that's what I think the motivation is at some point.
This is the byproduct of losing in the first round too, and it was a sour loss again to Boston, a 7th game. You were up 4-3 going into the third period, even though most fans were pretty white-knuckled about the entire experience, not truly believing it was going to happen, and it didn't happen. But these are the things that you're right about. I think we're too early into this process to start pointing fingers at either the coach or the players for being either too petulant or too overbearing. There's still a few more seasons here of a team coming together and finding its way towards what we hope is as a Stanley Cup championship. Talk to me in about 3 or 4 years when Mike Babcock becomes a total prick, or we're bumping up against the real moment of truth for Auston Matthews or Mitch Marner or whomever, contractually and in terms of their growth as players, and no championships have been won, and there have been repeated stumbles in the playoffs. Then we can start pointing fingers at one another. But I don't think we're there yet. And I will say for Mike Babcock, this is a guy who's accomplished a lot. He's done a lot. He's been in the league as a head coach now for 15 years. I don't know how many, but he's getting up there. I hope he doesn't turn into a crusty Mike Keenan or a John Tortorella after souring on the Toronto experience following failures. And with Auston Matthews, I hope he's never painted by anyone as a guy who is a coach killer, or he's overly petulant or bratty. I think we're too early into his career and Mike Babcock's tenure with the Leafs to start painting these people as with an image that they don't necessarily deserve yet, Mike.
I think all of this is a product of a lot of people who want to see this team win, who thought that they were closer to being a Stanley Cup champion than I ever thought they were. I mean, I like I said, I predicted Boston. I thought they had the better chance of beating Boston in the first round than Tampa, but I didn't think that they were as good as either team. They're still a flawed roster. There's still lots of holes. Are they much better than the team that we saw a few years ago with Phil Kessel and Dion Phaneuf? Leaps and bounds, and they're on the upward track. But there's still room for improvement here. And just because they had 105 points does not mean that they were Stanley Cup contender. They had teams they had to face in the Atlantic Division. Their defense was weak. And, I think they're still a little weak up front in terms of certain positions, namely center now, because Bozak is probably gone and so is Plekanec. So this is a work in progress. And people who thought they were going to win the Stanley Cup and got all upset because they bowed out in the first round, grow up.
Hey, it's all Jake Gardner's fault, remember? It's funny. I like Jake Gardner. He's not the most well-rounded defenseman there is, but he brings a lot of positives. The Leafs need more support. So there's the case to be made that Jake Gardner is what he is. Let him be what he is on a blue line constructed of multiple pieces with a lot of diversity, with a lot of ability to do different things. The other thing is, if he's one of your top guys and he's making money and he's going to be coming up into free agency here relatively soon, maybe it's time to figure out a different way of going. But that's not up to me. That's up to the brass. And, as soon as Brendan Shanahan can figure out who his general manager is going to be, Kyle Dubas, and who Kyle Dubas' right-hand man is going to be, Mark Hunter, pay him a lot of money. Then these guys can start sorting out what they want to do in terms of the team on the ice. And don't forget, July 1st is coming about, and it would be really fun, Mike, for you and I to be here on June 30th or whatever. I don't know. Does it go 31 days? I don't know. But to be anticipating a big move by the Maple Leafs, a big signing, and then John Tavares is that guy. That would just be a lot of fun. The last thing for you, Brad Marchand, him and the Boston Bruins are out of the playoffs. The Leafs weren't able to do it. The Tampa Lightning are able to, and Jesus Christ, that team is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Who knows? Maybe them and the Jets in the Stanley Cup final. They did a really nice job. And Brad Marchand, the guy's become a glorified Sean Avery here with his antics on the ice, the licking and stuff. It's just, it's okay, Brad. We like that you're an agitator. You do walk the line, but this, like, not only do these players have to run the risk of getting a staph infection when they get into that setting. Now you're licking them, and it's just disgusting, and it's stupid. And again, do you want to be? I mean, name an agitator who lived off that characteristic plus point production, who's in the Hall of Fame. Do you want to be that player, or do you want to be Sean Avery? Do you want to be in Hollywood, trying to audition for B movies, Brad? Because I mean, it's just pathetic. Last word to you, Mike. We got to go.
Well, I really blame the NHL in this instance, because after the incident with Komarov during the Leafs series, there was reporting, and good reporting, that said that the NHL talked to the Bruins, and obviously they didn't, or the message never got to Brad Marchand, because he continued to do that with his disgusting display. And okay, it's not like he needs somebody in the groin, but he's cross-checking. Look at the video I think I retweeted a couple days ago of him cross-checking and sticking his stick under the visor of Alex Killorn during one of the games. The licking thing was a distraction, was a way of getting underneath the skin of Tampa Bay, and it didn't work. And his other tactics didn't work. And then the thing is that Tampa was a deeper, more talented, more experienced team, and pushed back against the Bruins, and that's why they won. And Brad Marchand and his antics couldn't do anything to stop it.
Mike, we know we don't like the fisticuffs anymore, right? But the league is clearly living off of the Brad Marchand sideshow. He's Sideshow Bob 0.3, right? Darcy Tucker was the original Sideshow Bob, but Darcy Tucker would have knocked the shit out of Brad Marchand. He put Zdeno Chara on his ass. I mean, that guy, say what you will about Tucker. Some people didn't like him. But my point is, with Marchand, a guy like that, and I know it's the playoffs, a guy like that needs his ass kicked for this kind of stuff. I mean, if you were licked by him and he was sticking his stick up under your visor and doing this kind of stuff, and the league just seemed to get his penalty, but there was nothing going on, wouldn't you want somebody to beat his ass? I mean, it sounds really barbaric, and it sounds Neanderthal. It sounds like it's just, you don't want to resort to fisticuffs, but after a while, the guy's show is just, he's going to do something to somebody to hurt him really, really badly. And the fact, if I got licked by him, I'd want to punch his face in. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you?
Yeah, no. I mean, let's just say in the past, anybody would drop the gloves and try to beat the crap out of him. In the realm now of the NHL, where nobody does that anymore, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody took a baseball swing at him, at somebody with a stick. And that's the thing. The league has gotten away from settling things, in the manner that they used to. And people thought that was barbaric, but honestly, this kind of sideshow stuff, and I believe me, Darcy Tucker and Brad Marchand, maybe there were similarities in terms of them being antagonists and sort of getting underneath the skin. One player stood up for himself, the other one doesn't.
Oh, Tucker, say what you want about that guy, man. That guy had a heart of gold, man, and he had nerves of steel. And that, one day we'll reflect on those teams, Mike. That was a lot of fun. Plus, I'm really excited, Mike. I haven't laid this on you yet, but you and I are going to do a long episode of the Leafs Convo, just talking about the Leafs Talk days and how much fun that was to engage with the legend Andy Frost after wins and losses. It was just, and we can revisit the Nigel Cadbury moment. Remember that? That was just beautiful. Listen, I gotta go. Yes. I gotta go water the grass again, man. My wife put down fertilizer, and if I don't get that grass watered, it's going to burn the grass and it's my ass. Gotta go, Mike. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Norman.
Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out the Anchor page. Go listen there, then listen again on iTunes. And then you can do the same thing on Google Play. Come back to the YouTube page, like and subscribe to it, and leave a comment while you're there. There's so much Leafs conversation to be had in the days, weeks, and months ahead. We're in for it. Are you? Tell your friends. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. This is the Leafs Convo. Talk to you next time.